Hi guys, welcome back to Pilates by Eden. Today we'll be doing a beginner basics class. So we'll be focusing on some of the principles of Pilates to help you be more successful when you take the other workouts. This is Brianna here. She's going to help me demonstrate. So we're going to start lying down on our backs. Now, one of the most important things about Pilates is our breath work. So when we think about breath, we think about the mind connecting to the body through breath. So she's just going to start with a few breaths. And just settling down into the table each time she exhales. And one thing here, when you're in your constructive rest position, you're going to flip the palms up. We're going to let legs lie where they want to. Rest the shoulders down into the table. And she's just going to start to notice where her body rises and falls through her breath. So maybe it's her chest. Maybe it's coming a little more into her belly. Maybe a little more lateral through the ribs. You can play with your breath and sort of move it around those places. The other thing about the breath and connection to the body is that it helps us dictate the speed of our movement. We'll do a few more breaths, just paying attention to where her body rises and noticing how the ribs come a little closer together as she loses air in the body. We'll do two more. And the last breath, as big as she can through her nose, nice and steady all the way in. And nice and steady all the way out. You can also imagine like there's a balloon inside of your chest. Imagine a color of the balloon, and as you breathe in, you're inflating the balloon with air. And as you exhale, the air is coming slowly out. So we're going to attach some movement to it here, but just some basic movement to start to become aware of how our body is placed here in space. She's going to bend her knees and bring her feet flat to the table. And here, as soon as you do that, you feel the low back and the tailbone, sort of the pressure of your body on the mat. So she's going to pay attention to how that feels. And we're going to try to find a neutral pelvis. So we're going to play with the pelvis a little bit in an anterior tilt and a posterior tilt. And then right in the middle, we're going to find a neutral position. So she's going to put a little bit of pressure into her feet, and she's going to tuck her tail towards her chin. So we're basically essentially drawing hips towards ribs. Booty is still going to be on the table, but you're going to feel it lift up just a tad. She's going to release that as she exhales, drawing her tail more towards her heels or into the floor. And that might create a space for her low back here, but we just start to kind of feel the movement through the pelvis. So she's going to do that on her own pattern of breath. Inhaling to tuck and exhaling to release. Good. And just start to mobilize a little bit through that sacrum or tailbone. So she's going to pause right in between those two movements to where her tail feels nice and flat. You can kind of search for the shape of that triangle feeling on the mat. And we're going to make sure her heels are lined up with her sit bones. We want to be nice and aligned so we can have equal pressure into both feet. And this time as she exhales, she's going to find that same tuck of the pelvis towards her chin. She's going to gently press into her feet and start to lift the booty up. So we're thinking one vertebra at a time lifts up. Shoulders are still staying melted down into the table. She's pausing here for a moment. So you can see that nice, long, beautiful line. Thinking about the quad muscles reaching up and over the knee as the knees reach for the toes. And here you want to think about your hips being nice and level. So if you notice one hip is dipped down a little more than the other, you can kind of play with it and see if you can get the hips to stay nice and even. She's taking a big breath in here at the top. She's probably had a few already. And then as she exhales, a little melt as she rolls back down. So she's going to keep doing those bridges, and I'm going to talk about a few more things to pay attention to. So you might notice certain parts of your spine lift up all together and they don't quite have that articulated one after another feel. So those are the areas for you that you should focus on. So as you're coming down, if you're not feeling the low back getting that curl, you can pause, add an extra exhale, and really focus on getting one piece at a time down and one piece at a time up. Another thing to think about is the weight of your body into your feet. So I can tell her toes are a little lifted. She's got some weight into the heels, but we want to have equal pressure into both feet. Good. And here you feel the booty activated to help keep the hips lifted up. You feel a little hamstring work. You're going to soften to roll slowly down. So this is your basic bridge. It's a great thing to do at home any time of the day to focus on your spine health. And a slow roll back down. Good. We'll do two more. This time I want you to think a little bit more about the upper back. So as she rolls up, she's all the way up to the shoulder blades. And as she begins to melt down, it's right where that chin is aimed down at the chest. You're gonna melt that chest or sternum down to the floor before the ribs. And last one. So if that's hard for you to think about, I'm gonna have her roll down sequentially, one little bit at a time. So we'll think just the chest and sternum, everything else stays lifted. And then we'll think scapulas or bra line comes down. Ugh. And then think upper ribs kind of press down to the mat, lower ribs, belly button, hips touch together, finally the tailbone, and you release the pelvis. One more just like that, thinking of being more sequential. Rolling it up, nice breath, and a slow roll down. Great job. So this is a really good way to approach back pain. Awesome. And she's going to pull both knees into her chest, get a little stretch. You're going to feel length through the spine as she pulls the knees in. And gradually back to our start position. Good. So we're going to think a little bit about the arms here for a moment. So she's going to float her arms to what we call rib cage arms. So rib cage arms where the hands are just floating directly over the shoulders. And you'll notice when you lift your arms, your shoulders kind of want to come with it. So we want to disassociate those two things. After the arms lift, she's going to find a breath, and she's going to exhale, let the shoulders settle back down into the table, and that's going to open up through the chest. So you want to keep that nice, beautiful, open chest, and that's your rib cage arms. So if we're practicing how to disassociate the shoulders, she's going to start to reach her arms overhead as she inhales. And as she exhales, she's going to draw the ribs down towards her hips and bring the arms back up to the start position. So she wants to make sure as she reaches, she's not losing space through her neck. She wants to keep her neck nice and long. Inhale to reach, and try to keep the low back pressed down as she's reaching overhead. And exhale back. So it's almost as if when the arms begin to reach, the ribs melt down towards your hips at the same time. Arms reach, ribs draw down. And that keeps her back nice and flat on the table. And we'll do one more. And exhale back. Great. And once you find all of these pieces, all these little principles, then they can blend them together in different exercises to challenge your stability. So I'm gonna have her rest her arms by her side, and we'll move into a tabletop. So when we think about tabletop, we want to make sure the knees are rested directly over the hips and that the heel is lined up with the back of the knee. So it's that beautiful 90-degree angle. And if you're new to Pilates, this can be work on its own, just holding a tabletop position. So I want her to move her ankles a little bit in this position, but stay in that 90 degree. She's going to point and flex through the ankles. And as she flexes, she can feel length through the back of the leg. As she points, there's energy shooting off of the knee out through the toes. 3 more. And 2. And last one. Great. And then go ahead and give yourself a few circles. And reverse. Good. And you can pause there nice and neutral. So she's in that tabletop position. When we think about what happens to our abdominals as we extend our extremities away from the midline, it challenges our core. So if she were to extend her legs, she's gonna feel her abs kick on in order to support the weight of her legs out extended. And then drawing the belly down, she's gonna pull the knees back in. So this is where you can work nice and slow and get a lot of work up, but with a very simple move. A leg extension, and she can feel that probably more in the mid or upper area. So if we were going to extend the legs with a bent knee in the 90°, so more of like a hinge from the hip, that's going to get lower into the abdominal, so more into the low abdominal area. So you can play with where the legs go in order to challenge those specific parts of the abdominals that you're wanting to work on. And then that's a little bit lower, right? Yes. And we'll do 2 more. Good. So if you notice that your low back pops up off of the mat as you lower the legs, you went a little bit too far. So everybody's a little different. Everybody's a little stronger in different positions. So maybe you're only going to go halfway because you're paying attention to what happens to the back. And then you draw it back. And then as you get stronger, you can increase the range. So from here, we're going to add our ribcage arms with it. So here she goes with ribcage arms and a tabletop, taking a breath, letting the shoulders settle down, noticing the weight of your body on your back. And she's going to do that same 90-degree hinge towards the mat as the arms reach overhead. So now we're coordinating our body with our breath. Exhale to return. Inhale. So this is how we're staying nice and safe to protect our low back as we challenge our abdominals. Inhale and exhale. And it's kind of a brain thing to think about the ribs staying here as she works away from the midline. It's kind of a challenge, but that's the way you should approach the more advanced exercises with this safety in mind. 3 more. And 2. Awesome. And last one. And she's just going to go for a hug with her knees into the chest to take a little break. So now I'm going to have her roll over onto her belly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about spine health. So similarly to the bridge, we want to think a little bit about articulating through the spine, right? So when we're folding forward, we're creating flexion, and as we open up the opposite direction, we're creating extension. So here, she's going to feel her pelvis sort of floating up off of the mat, and she's going to take a breath in and just tuck her pelvis into the floor. So that's going to give us, yes, and then release it out. So that's going to give us another protection through the low back as we find extension through the upper back. So start with just pressing your pelvis into the mat and then releasing it. It's kind of like the pelvic tilt we did on our back, but just in a different position. And release. And what's interesting about this is as she tucks, you'll notice that it lengthens and opens through the low back. And then as she releases it out, she feels that more neutral position. Good. So we're going to go into a cactus arm or a goalpost arm. So her arms are going to be bent. Exactly. And a good way to think about it is elbow lines up with the armpit, and make sure that you have your traps relaxed here on the top and your neck is long. So she's going to keep her forearms and palms pressing down into the mat, and she's just going to lift her head and shoulders just gently up off of the mat as she inhales, and then to lower back down. So that's the move we're going to work on. Let's start with the press of the pelvis into the mat, and then a press into the palms and forearms, and then a gentle lift. And I'm going to let her line her head up there. So here in this position, a common thing that people do is way overextend through the neck. So I really want you to focus on keeping your head aligned with your spine, right? So it gives us some more awareness of where we are in space, and lower back down as you exhale. So for you, Brianna, I want to see this beautiful butterfly the whole time. Firefly, dragonfly, there. Nice. And lower back down. Pressing the pelvis into the mat before we lift up into extension. and lower back down. So for a lot of us, this is really, really important to do extension work. Number one, to train our back muscles to be nice and strong to support us, but also to get some mobility through the spine in the upper thoracic area. So typically we don't fold as much in these areas as we do in the low back, but there is mobility through the spine. So she wants to create a little bit of mobility in these upper areas. Pause right there, yes. And lower back down. So I'm going to challenge her a little bit. We all typically have a space where we fold pretty naturally. So I'm going to have her just press up to where she normally presses up, and we're going to look at her shirt and see kind of where it folds. So she's folding here pretty much. A lot of people fold lower in the mid back or the lower back. And then I'm going to challenge her by giving her different points in order to move. So go ahead and lower down. I'm going to bring my fingers on either side of your spine. And as you lift up into extension, you're going to try to fold at this spot. And lower down, good. So you get to play with it a little bit and let the size of the movement change based on where you want to mobilize. You do a little, yeah, then they get a little more challenging as you get higher, but you can really feel it. Nice. So it's as if you're going to put your scapulas here back down into your pockets, or they're going to slide down your back. Yes, good. And we're just going to do one more. Think about an open chest, scapulas down your back. Good. And release it out. Good. So if you want to increase your challenge on an extension work, you can float your arms and float your legs to add a little bit more extra work. But we're going to move on to a quadruped position. So she's going to come on up to her hands and knees. And just like in the tabletop position, we want our hips to float directly over the knee because we want the load between the hands and the knees to be similar, to be equal, to share the weight of our body. We're going to think about a nice flat spine, long from head to the hip bones. And you can think about there's like a flat stick here on her back and she wants to hold it there. A lot of people's heads sag down, so make sure you bring your head all the way up to line with that pole, that invisible pole on your back. So here I want her to play with her weight a little bit by shifting it from her right hand to her right knee to her left knee, left hand, and just kind of moving her weight around. And that helps build our awareness of where our weight is. We're going to pause neutral where you feel nice and even. She's going to have a soft elbow so we don't lock them out. Taking a breath in, she's going to expand laterally here. So I want her to breathe really wide into her rib cage. As she exhales, she feels the belly drawing up, but she's not going to round through the back. So it's internally lifting, increasing that abdominal pressure. And we'll do one more breath. And an exhale, she's getting strong through the center. On the next exhale, we're going to imagine a punch to the tummy, a tuck of the tail, and she's going to roll into a ball. She wants to press the pelvis gently forward, creating as much flexion as she can through the body. And then as she inhales, she's going to open through the chest. Think about that extension move. Traps open up and tailbone opens up to the back. And again, exhale to tuck and round. Keeping pressure in the knees and the hands. And then lower back to your extension as you inhale. Scapula's drawing down in this position. And we'll do one more. So I want to really encourage her to draw those low abdominals back as much as possible to create more roundness through this flat area here through her low back. Last one. And then press right to neutral, thinking about that imaginary pole. Great job. So we're going to do some movement in this position, but we're going to make sure that we're doing it on the exhale, because as we lose our stability on one side, our weight tends to shift around. So she's going to float that right arm out in front of her towards her ear, but not sink down through the right hip side or ribs, right? So she stays lifted. And then bring that arm back to center. And again, reach with the left and try not to change the shape. and lower it back. And it's really cool just to think about, okay, here goes my arm. What abdominals are being challenged to help me stay in this stable position? Back. Last one. And back. Good. So we're going to play with the legs a little bit too. Right arm extends to hold. Left leg extends to hold. So it's your typical pointer dog, right? And this is where you see the shift happening. So you just try to focus on the hips staying level, chest staying open, nice big breath. As you exhale, do nothing, just lift the belly towards the spine to regain that strength through your middle. One more breath here. And then exhale to crease through the hip and bring everything back to neutral. So she's going to do that on the other side. Reaching, and then holding. Right there, yes. One more breath, and slowly coming back center. Great. Go ahead and draw your booty back to your heels for a child's pose. Here, reaching her arms as far away as she can, tailbone away from the head, getting nice and long. And then I'm just going to have her come to seated on the table with your legs hanging off the front. Yes. So just a basic lateral stretch so that she can finish on a nice stretch. Her left arm will float, exhale over. And here, as you go lateral, this rib tends to poke out, or we fold forward or backward. So try to stay nice and lateral as you reach over. And you can do a few of those on that side. You can reach the right arm farther away if you want to get lower. It's kind of just based on your own flexibility. But we can think about as we go lateral is the ribs reaching away from the hip on this side, and the rib is coming closer to the hip on the other side. And then to the left. And she's going to try to keep this right hip pressing down as she reaches over to increase the length that we can get between rib and hip. Awesome. And one more. Nice. And all the way up. Good job, Rihanna. Thanks for joining, you guys. So basically using your basic Pilates principles when you're doing any of the other videos that I've been posting, that'll really help you be a little bit more successful. So thank you so much. Bye.